morning to the West Coast and good afternoon from the East Coast. Um, I was listening to our chant of the opening of the sutra, and Rebecca Sanilt, a writer who's written a number of things, she wrote about sutras being written on the in the day on plant leaves, and they were sewn together. And I was thinking, in listening to the chant, is rarely encountered even in millions of ages. Now we see it, now we hear it, and when we engage in a talk like this, what are we getting ourselves sewn into? Um, what are we getting ourselves sewn into? And how the Dharma is always with us, but is rarely perceived, but always encountered. And I was thinking, what I'd like to do this morning with you is share a story. Some of you might be very familiar. It's called Jakata tale, and the Jakata tales are the stories of the life of the Buddha. And I'll go into that a little bit more. But I wanted to share the story, and it's called The Brave Little Parrot. And the story begins with the Buddha was born as a gray parrot who lived in this green forest. And this green parrot, she loved her home. She had a lot of friends, and she would fly through this lush forest and just sing in the air. And further above in the heavens were gods and goddesses who were always having a good time, laughing and drinking and talking amongst themselves. Then one day, dark clouds came over the forest, and a lightning bolt hit a dead tree. And the lightning bolt caused the tree to burst into flames and then began to start setting the forest on fire. And the little parrot noticed this, and she started to scream out, "Fire, fire! Everyone, run, try to save yourselves. Run to the river so you can be saved." So the animals heard her, and she kept screaming, "Fire and fire." And they started to panic, and they started running towards the water to save themselves. And the fire began to spread, and the parrot noticed how her friends, the animals, were trapped, and how all the trees that she had come to love were being burned around her. And she had this rather, let's say, desperate idea. She was going to try to put out the fire. So she flew to the river, and she dropped her body into the river, and then she flew up into the sky and went to the heart of the flames and started shaking her feathers, hoping that the droplets from the feathers from the water would begin to put out the fire. And she did this over and over and over again. Meanwhile, up in the heavens, the gods and goddesses were having a good time, and one of them looked down from heaven and said, "Look at that stupid parrot. Doesn't she see what's going on? She's really stupid. She doesn't know what's going on." And so the other gods agreed and said, "Well, she's just a waste of time." And so back and forth, the parrot flew, dumping her body in the water, flying out and trying to put out the flames, So one of the gods decided, well, she needs to be told this is a waste of time. And he says, "I'm going to try and stop her." So he put down his silver bowl and gold chalice and changed into a great eagle. And he flew down, and he flew next to the parrot, and he says, "Parrot," he says, "this is a waste of time. Give up. Let this thing play itself out. These animals die, this forest gets burned." And she says, "No." She says, these creatures they're my friends. They need to be saved." And so down she went back into the water, immersed herself, and flew above the flames. And as she was kept doing this, of course, she started to get burned herself. She started coughing and choking, and her feathers began to start to burn. And the eagle couldn't stand it. So he flew further up to observe this. And as he saw the parrot going back and forth, he was quite moved about what he saw. And he started to cry. And the story goes, as he was crying, his tears came down like torrents of rain and began to extinguish the flames in the forest. And as his tears kept coming down and down and down, and the fire started to diminish, till everything was so totally, the fires were put out. But then something miraculous happened. All of a sudden, new life began to emerge from the forest. The leaves began to start flourishing, all the animals became well, and the parrot was changed. She got a new set of feathers. Green like the trees, red like the fire, yellow like the sun. And everyone was very happy because they were saved. And the great eagle learned a lesson, that he was so moved by the compassion and perseverance of the parrot that he didn't want to be a god anymore. He didn't want to hang out in the clouds and just dwell, but to be and of service. And so that's how the story ends, with everyone being hale and hearty. As I mentioned earlier, the Jakata tales are stories about the past life of the Buddha. Many of those stories still exist. Some have been lost over the years, over the centuries, rather. But the interesting thing I've learned about these tales is it's not, first of all, it's the story of the Buddha and how the Buddha has gone in these different stages of life helps. There are some stories in which the Buddha has actually had to learn how to be compassionate, how to be persevering, before he himself could then go on to help other people. But the other piece about the Jakata tales are, where are you in it? Where are you in this tale? Are you up there with the gods and goddesses? I hear you're on Shishin or Ango. Are you up there with the gods and goddesses hanging out and having a good time? Where are you? That's an important piece to this tale. It's very easy to say it's a very nice story, which it is, but where are you in this story? It's easy to say that, we can dip into meditative awareness. Okay, what are we doing with that meditative awareness? Are we that parrot who is dipping into that awareness and trying to put out the fire in the world? Or are we just sitting and having a nice conversation amongst ourselves and feeling very nice about what we do? The world is on fire. How are we, if we're like that parrot, taking what we have together and beginning to extinguish the flames? How are you making a difference? I believe our practice calls us from being self-centered to life-giving. That's what I'd like to believe. That's why we do this. Yesterday, I was at a Learn to Meditate conference here in the city, and there were different Buddhist traditions represented, and pretty much with the exception of myself, everyone talked about body, form, breath, mind. Everyone said the same thing, pretty much. No one talked about any kind of action. No one said a word. Meanwhile, the world is on fire. So here we are with this tale where we can learn something about ourselves. And how do we make use of ourselves in this world? So I leave it with you. Where are you in this tale? And how are you using your practice to help the world?